Here at E2, one technique that we teach our students when they're preparing for their IELTS speaking test is the PPF method. The PPF method involves talking about the past, present, and future, which helps you use complex grammar and gives you ideas for your response. In this video, I'm going to teach you 8 techniques to talk about the past, the first P in our IELTS speaking PPF method. Now, one of the main criteria for IELTS speaking is that you develop your ideas. And what we often notice is that students don't do this enough, particularly when they're beginning to learn. Now, just before we look at our IELTS Speaking Part 2 question, don't you forget to like, subscribe, and comment. Here's the question. You need to describe a movie you enjoyed recently. Then you need to say what the movie was, when you saw it, what it was about, and describe why you enjoyed this movie. So, for an IELTS Speaking Part 2 question like this, you would have 1 minute to prepare your answer and then 2 minutes to talk. Now, I was an IELTS examiner for 5 years, and this is how I would see students answer Speaking Part 2 almost every week.
So I'm going to describe a movie I enjoyed recently. The movie is called Toy Story 3, and I saw it a few weeks ago. And it's about toys that are alive. And I liked it because...
Okay, please stop. This is not a good response. I used to call this the and train. Students run out of ideas and they keep adding information without any thought. They just say and then they keep going and they say and again and they add more information. Now, it's not wrong, and sometimes and is the best word available. But if you're aiming for 6, 7, or higher, you will need more than this one word. But don't worry, in this video, I'm going to teach you a few ways to avoid the and train and get a higher score. The first technique is start with a time intro. A lot of IELTS students will start like this.
I'm going to talk about a movie that I enjoyed recently. The movie is called Toy Story 3.
This is not wrong, but if you want to get a higher score, you'll want to get into the substance of your response faster than Jay did here. And you can do this with a time intro. A time intro is a phrase that will help you start part 2 naturally, like how you would if you were in a conversation with a friend or in an interview. For example, we might start with, last week I watched this movie, or every Christmas I watch that movie, or when I was a kid I loved watching, every day, next year, on rainy days. So, while you're preparing for IELTS, you'll want to practice starting this way so that on test day it feels natural. The great thing about these phrases is that they kind of force you to reflect. And so the more you practice them, the more automatically you'll be able to just speak calmly on test day. Let's listen to Jay's new response, this time with a time intro.
A few weeks ago, I rewatched Toy Story 3.
Great. These time intros will allow you to start quickly and start using the descriptive and thoughtful language that will get you to that higher score. Now, in his response, Jay is not trying to give the right answer. He's telling a story. He's reflecting. And this is how thoughtful and descriptive language comes out naturally. Now, to ensure that you use thoughtful and descriptive language, you'll want to reflect on your life and compare it to now. Remember, the examiner isn't looking for a correct answer. They're looking at how well you develop ideas, the range of grammar and vocab you use, as well as your pronunciation. In order to improve those things, you need to explore your ideas. Here are some ways you could do that. by making comparisons between the past and now. Technique 2. Compare the past with the present. Here are some great phrases that will help you compare the past with the present. When I was younger, but now. Last year, but now. When I was in high school, but now. When I lived in Canada or India or France, but now. Let's see how Jay responds by comparing the past to the present.
When I was younger, I didn't really like Pixar movies, but the other day Toy Story 3 was on TV, so I just started watching it, and I was really surprised at how good it was.
That was a great response. Did you notice how he used complex language? The vocabulary was clear, but more importantly, he extended his ideas in a natural way, and that's the most important thing. So many students will get focused on grammar and getting the word exactly right, but how can you have complex grammar if you're not accustomed to developing complex or at least reflective ideas? You also might have noticed how Jay emphasized the word didn't when he said he didn't like Pixar movies. Well, we also have a video all about emphasis in IELTS Speaking. Be sure to check it out at e2testprep.com to see how you can improve your pronunciation on test day. Let's have a look at another way we can extend ideas. Technique 3, talk about past habits. When talking about old habits, the phrase used to is great. It makes you start reflecting quickly. It might look like this. When I was a kid, I used to, and then you continue by adding details with I would. Let's see what Jay can tell us.
My brother and I used to watch movies together all the time. He would usually pick action movies, but when it was my turn to pick, I'd usually pick cartoons. I remember watching Transformers the movie with him once, the really old animation one, which is funny because it's actually a pretty emotional film, and I guess that's what Toy Story 3 reminded me of. There's a scene towards the end that's actually pretty intense, and it really brought me back to feeling like a kid again.
Let's look at this response in a bit more detail. So here, Jay says, my brother and I used to watch movies together all the time. Great, used to. Then he starts adding details with would and the basic form. He would pick action movies. But when it was my turn to pick, I would, or in this case, I'd, usually pick cartoons. So we've got used to and would, and we can use them in the same way to describe a past habit. He's also extended with which is funny because in order to start reflecting on the experience and clearly connect it with Toy Story 3. So he's compared the two movies, vintage E2 technique. Fantastic. Let's get back to the next extending technique, which is technique number 4, use emotion. What is the emotional part of your speaking response? And how can you prime yourself to talk about something emotionally? Here are a few words that might make you think more clearly about this. Sadly, to be honest, fortunately, or unfortunately. These words can really help you channel the emotion that you felt and let ideas inform the grammar and vocabulary that you use. Let's take a look at the next part of Jay's answer.
To be honest, I don't watch a lot of big Hollywood movies these days. I think they're kind of empty, which isn't great for kids. I remember feeling a lot more inspired by movies when I was younger. Sadly, I think it's too hard to compete with video games these days for kids' attention. But I think if I were a kid again and saw this movie, I might be pretty impressed and inspired.
Great. Now, is this really answering the question? Yes. Jay talked about a movie he enjoyed recently and why he enjoyed it, and he even spoke about it in an abstract way. He's no movie expert and he's no child psychologist, but he's able to talk about these ideas in a thoughtful and meaningful way just by using his own experience and ideas. Now, some of you might be thinking, these are great ideas. I'm totally going to use them in my next test. That's great, but remember, practice is essential. And so is feedback. You can get feedback by taking a speaking assessment with E2 Test Prep. One of our IELTS experts will tell you what you've done, as well as what you might want to do to improve your score. Speaking feedback is available in a range of IELTS preparation packages at e2testprep.com. Let's look at the next technique. Technique number 5, talk about a new experience. Let's take a look at these phrases. I had never seen anything like it. Or, I had never before. These phrases show that whatever you're talking about changed you somehow. It's not just something that happened, but it made you think or behave differently. Pay attention to it in Jay's response.
I actually cried a little bit. I'd never cried while watching a movie before, so I guess I have to admit that this movie was pretty special.
Also, while we're using the past perfect verb tense, I had seen, for example, let's have a look at another way we can use the past perfect. This technique is providing backstory. Technique number 6, provide a backstory. Sometimes, whilst telling a story, we remember details about things that happened before the story we're telling. Here's an example of Jay adding extra details with the past perfect verb tense.
A few weeks ago, I watched the movie Alien. I'd actually seen it when I was much younger, but I'd forgotten most of what happened.
Great. So Jay has again started with a time intro, but then he added a bit of detail. Then he very spontaneously added a bit of backstory. People do this all the time in every language. Now, in both of these techniques, he used the past perfect. Let's have a closer look at his response. I'd never cried while watching a movie before. A few weeks ago, I watched the movie Alien. I'd actually seen it when I was much younger, but I'd forgotten most of what happened. Let's just have a quick reminder of the grammar. I had never cried. I had actually seen it before. I had forgotten. So again, we have I had followed by the past participle. It's a great way to incorporate a wider range of grammar. Be careful, we are talking about something that happened before the story that we're telling, but try to think of this as providing background to what you're describing. Again, let the ideas that come to you guide the language that you use. The more you reflect, the more you'll need to use complex language. Now let's move on to the next technique. Technique 7, reflect globally. In this technique, you reflect on what other people might think and then compare that to what you think. You can do it with phrases like these. I know that most people think, but I, Some people, but I, Some people think, Other people think, so I think, What do people think or do generally? Do people typically like or dislike this movie? This gives you a chance to reflect on it and further explore. Let's hear Jay's response.
I know a lot of people think that this is probably just a kid's movie, but I actually think that there's a lot of deep themes that adults will actually relate to more. Friendship, despair, even mortality.
And by the way, this is a great place to keep extending with a good example. Listen to this.
There's one scene near the end where it looks like all the characters are about to die. It's pretty intense. You see them all holding hands and there's this look on their face that shows that they fully understand that this is the end. It's pretty intense. I don't know if kids pick up on that, but adults definitely will.
That's a pretty good response. But I've got one more IELTS speaking technique for you. Technique number 8, consider the importance. I always ask my students to think about these words when answering an IELTS speaking question. So what? Why does it matter? What's so great about what you've just said? Have a look at these phrases, which is important because, which is great because, which is unfortunate because, which is really weird because, which was really unexpected because. These phrases are all really useful to explain why your response is important or why it matters. Let's listen to how Jay explains why his response is important.
I think this is great. Whoever wrote the story must have really wanted kids to see and feel that friendship is perhaps one of the most important things in our lives, which is great because so many movies just try to excite kids and make them watch more. We need more movies like this. Sadly, I think too many kids' movies nowadays just want to make kids laugh with silly jokes.
Your opinions, your positions, your personality will give you the ideas. Let the ideas guide your language. So let's recap. The first technique we looked at was start with a time intro. Number 2, compare the past with the present. Number 3, talk about past habits. Number 4, use emotions. Technique 5, talk about a new experience. Number 6, provide backstory. 7, reflect globally. And 8, consider the importance. All right, so keep in mind, you don't want to memorize all these techniques, but when you're practicing, use these patterns to help you develop your ideas. On test day, you're not going to try to remember them and use them. It should be a habit. And of course, you don't have to use all of them. Absolutely not. 1 or 2 of them will probably give you enough to extend your idea adequately. By the way, you might be thinking this is great. I've got some good ideas that I can use now. So you'll want to get feedback from an IELTS expert. So be sure to go over to e2testprep.com and see what IELTS preparation package will work best for you. At E2, we've got the world's best teachers and ex-examiners who will teach you the methods and strategies you need and give you the best IELTS speaking feedback. Remember, the focus of the test is that you explain and extend your ideas. The main point is not to answer the question in some kind of perfect way, because there are no perfect answers. Build these techniques and build the habits that they bring, and you'll never struggle to extend ideas in part 2 again. From there, you just want to keep building your vocabulary and grammar. I'm Mark, that's all for this video, and I'll see you in the next one.